Welcome, everybody. It's so great to have you with us for the session on Gapping It. I'm Susie Marsden, co-founder of AMPT, and for those of you who are new to us, we run career planning programs to help people find their way to work that they can love. We mainly work with organisations helping their people, but we also run a program for students in years 12 and 13 because we love the idea that they can get heading in the right direction from the get-go. And speaking of students in years 12 and 13, they have had, well, we've all had a hell of a year, haven't we? A hell of a year, and they've had a hell of a year, you know, missing out on so many things that their brothers and sisters have experienced, or that older peers have experienced. This year, universities cancelled all the open days left, right and centre. You know, people have been feeling quite despondent with all of the, or disillusioned with all of the online study, and then wary at the prospect of potentially more online study at university. But then on the other hand, you know, we've got employers who are desperate for employees left, right and centre across a number of sectors. So we thought this was the perfect time to talk about the pros and cons of taking a study break. And we have got a fantastic panel alongside us to do that. My partner in crime, Sharon Spence. We have we got Liz yet?
Not yet. We're just waiting for Liz, but hopefully in the next moment or two she will arrive.
All right, I will introduce you when she gets here. But we have, unlike me, who went straight from school to university pronto, we have got three amazing young people who have all gapped it in one form or another. So we've got Meg Mahi, George Wynn, and Anna Gaglione. So welcome to you all. And what we'll do is we'll get you to introduce yourself as Liz arrives, and then we'll get her to introduce herself after that. So maybe we should start with you, Sharon.
Hi, thanks, Susie. It's really exciting to have you all here to be talking about something that's actually really dear to my heart, which is gapping it. Full disclosure, I had 2 gap years myself before finally getting myself off to university, a place that I kind of always knew I'd get to, but it took me a while to do it. But growing up in rural New Zealand, I had a very early burning desire to get out and see the world. And I think that was ignited by when I was in the 4th form, sitting next to a very glamorous exchange student from Germany, and I could just see myself doing that when I was at her age. So I started out halfway through my 7th form year, heading off to Indonesia as an exchange student for 10 or 11 months, and then the year later doing some backpacking around the US and making ends meet, selling clothes in a clothes shop in Te Puke. Fast forward 30 years, and I'm now the mother of 2 young women, both of whom are at university. And when they were at their decision-making time, I remember trying to convince them to think about taking a gap year. And it just fell on complete deaf ears, and I just couldn't understand why at the time. So I'm really thrilled to be looking at this topic in a lot more detail with this amazing panel that we've got lined up for you tonight.
Right.
So it's me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Meg, can we hear from you?
Yeah. So I basically decided to take a gap year after high school because I'd just done a world challenge where I went to Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and I just knew there was more out there. So I moved to the South Island and worked in the Southern Alps, and then at a bar, and got some hospo work under my belt, and then moved back up to Auckland, started working at Little Bird Organics as a barista. And then I decided to pretty much, I knew that I wanted to go back to university, or I knew that I needed to do something. So I went to Whitecliffe and studied there for 6 months in the certificate program. Yeah, in fine art there.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Meg. And George, what's your gapping it story?
Yeah, so I went on my gap year just after I'd finished high school. So I left and went overseas and worked in a school in the UK for the whole of 2014. Worked around as a gap tutor there. A lot of schools in New Zealand have them, and that's basically what I did. over there, and yeah, did a bit of travel and whatnot, and yeah, sort of chose to do it because I didn't exactly know what I was going to do next. And while I was over there, sort of decided that I'd go ahead and study at university. Ended up going down to study law in Otago, and now I'm currently working as a lawyer in Christchurch. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. And Anna, coming all the way to us from Hawaii, and she asks for everybody's forgiveness because she's slightly losing her voice. But Anna, tell us about your gap story.
I apologize, you guys, but I actually took my gap year after my first year of university, which I did in the States. I mostly did it due to COVID, but I decided to transfer to the University of Auckland and take some time off in between. During that time, I did a lot of nannying and working with young children. I spent a lot of time with my family, which was great. I feel like I missed that, working so hard in school and doing jobs and playing sports. So lots of really good quality time with them. I also did some part-time work with my dad doing construction, which really made me realize that I wanted to go back and do something other than digging ditches. It really gave me some time to consider my majors and classes. And I also took some free online courses at MIT, Stanford, Harvard, which they offer some free courses, which really gave me an opportunity to expand my focus past my previous pre-med major. And now I'm at the University of Auckland studying microbiology, macrobiology, and psychology.
Fantastic. And you start next year, don't you? Back home in Auckland.
I just finished my first year there.
Oh, so you did? Oh, awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. Great. Well, we're keeping all our fingers and toes crossed that we can get Liz on as a panelist, but I'm going to do her sort of introduction anyway, because I know her quite well. She's actually a wonderful mentor for us. So Liz Barry is on the Auckland University Careers Centre team, and she has done for a number of years. And she runs her own private practice as a career coach. So she has seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of university students through her time as a career coach. And so it has a lot of wisdom, if only we can get her on as a panelist to talk to us. And Sharon's working very hard on that at the moment. So for you guys, you'll see that we are recording this session, and so we'll make it available to you afterwards. And we hope that we'll have some time at the end, we should do, for some questions. So if you do have some questions that come up as we go through this webinar, please open the Q&A button at the bottom of your panel on your Zoom window and type away, and there will be time to answer those questions at the end. Sharon is going to set up the scene for us because we've done quite a bit of research and run a survey ourselves. And of course, we have a bit of experience talking to our own clients. So over to you.
Okay, thanks, Susie. So wrapping up high school and heading off to university is a kind of a Kiwi tradition. And in fact, 50% of our Kiwis actually do that. But you might be interested to know that a Tertiary Education Commission study done in 2017 found that 1 in 3 Kiwis actually either drop out of their studies altogether or switch courses midstream. So our question is really, are we sending our kids off to uni before they're really ready? So anecdotal evidence would say yes. Dropout rates are probably, quite connected to a lot of the social pressure that young people feel in their later school years, where everybody from grandma to aunties and uncles and people in school are constantly asking them, what are they going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to study? What university are you going to go to? And so young people often really feel quite a lot of pressure to make a decision and go with the flow and end up in university. And sometimes then find themselves, in a place where they really don't want to be doing what they don't want to be doing, and either drop out or have to scratch around and change course. Now, that experience can be pretty bruising for young people. It can be quite hard to kind of acknowledge that you've made a decision that's not quite right. And also you've got to kind of shoulder that extra financial cost of that decision too. And young people that actually do buck the trend and do decide to take a bit of space before going on to further training, they often get the incredulous questions. Like, why not? What are you going to do then? It seems that as a society, we're actually fairly suspicious of the gap year still. And research tells us that decision-making for careers is one of the most stressful processes young adults actually face. And most of us can probably actually remember that, having been there ourselves. And yet there's still a strong expectation that that our kids at school leaver age have a career plan. But do they really need a career plan at 18? And can they even create one? So Nathan Wallace, a neuroscience educator and a brain development researcher, who many of you I imagine will know, he would say no, actually. Many teens are simply ill-equipped to make those kinds of decisions at that age. And it's all to do with the development of the brain and the development of the frontal cortex. And that's that part of the brain that's so fully focused on, you know, making rational, measured, future-focused decisions. And career decisions and goal setting fall into that category, and they need a frontal cortex to actually operate. So when teens get into the driver's seat of their frontal cortex and it's all operational, they do so at vastly different ages. And it's also related to birth order as well. So it's related to gender and birth order. So modern research is telling us now that young women will have brain maturity achieved at, say, somewhere between 18 and 24 years on average, and males somewhere between 22 and 32 years on average. That's quite a span of what normal brain development is for a young man. So overlay birth order, where the firstborn children tend to mature faster than their younger siblings, you might find that your oldest son matures far, far sooner than his younger brothers. And you might even find that your oldest son matures at about the same age as his younger sister. So that's one thing affecting, young people's ability to make decisions. There's another one, which is that research suggests nowadays that career planning confidence requires substantial self-knowledge. And that self-knowledge needs to be paired with knowledge and understanding of the choices around us. And many young people lack that degree of self-knowledge when they're just heading off out of secondary school. And that same research is suggesting nowadays that that contributes to some of the personal and academic problems that people are experiencing sometimes in early university life. So what does all this tell us? Well, it really tells us that some people simply need more time to mature into their adult brain, to develop that self-knowledge and to understand the choices around them before being in a position or being ready to make those big decisions. Interestingly, some of the really big universities over in the States, specifically some of the big Ivy League universities like Harvard, they actively encourage their students to take a gap year before commencing their first year. And over in Europe, 1 in 4 kids actually will take a gap year before commencing later study. And if you go out to Norway and Denmark, they are at 50% mark. So, they're very comfortable with the idea of a gap. And yet we're wondering why more Kiwis don't do it. So tonight, our panel is going to tackle some of the big questions. What kind of people really benefit from a gap year? What are those benefits actually? And how can you be sure that you're going to get some of those benefits? Do gappers lose momentum? Do they kind of fall off the wagon and never go to university? Do they get so used to the money that they're earning during their hospo that they never go to university at all? And, has COVID killed the gap? So we're going to be dealing with some of those questions tonight. So I'm going to hand you back to Susie, and we're going to be talking to our gappers.
So we are going to go to you, Meg and Anna, to talk about, what prompted you to actually take a gap year. Maybe if we could start with you, Meg.
Yeah, sure. Basically, I knew that I wasn't going. There wasn't a clear course that I knew that I wanted to do. Unlike my peers, which were all either doing med or science or law or engineering. And to get those jobs, you kind of have to have a degree. And I wanted to be an artist. So I kind of thought I better go out into the real world and talk to real people who were already in the industry and pretty much, get real life experience.
Fantastic. And was that a scary idea, or did that feel quite, just natural?
It was a little scary because you have everyone going into university and you're kind of going against the tide a little bit. But there was kind of no doubt in my mind that I would get an apprenticeship or become an assistant or something like that. And
so it wasn't the employment. It wasn't the employment thing that was worrying you. No, not really. Right, cool. And Anna, how about you? What made you decide to take a break?
Well, like I said, I did my first year of university in 2019 into 2020. So right as COVID started to hit, my university decided to go online and was charging up of $60,000 a year with no reduction in tuition costs.
Huge.
And as United States colleges do, and I decided that I didn't want to learn how to be a doctor over Zoom, 5 in the morning over here. So I decided to take some time off to figure out what I really wanted to do. I had kind of burnt out in high school. I was a type A, work all the time kind of person in school. And so by the time I hit university, I was tired mentally. And so I felt like I was struggling to pick up my books and study. And I thought taking some time off to figure out what I really wanted to do would be better than spending a lot of money to dread waking up early and go to Zoom classes.
Yeah, fair enough.
That was my motivation.
Yeah, that sounds like a very sensible motivation. And George, why did you decide? You took a slightly different gap year. You took quite a structured, you were in a structured program. So what made you want to do that?
Yeah, so I guess my answer is kind of similar to Meg's in the sense that I didn't really know what I wanted to do following school finishing. And yeah, sort of in the early stages of my last year at school, we sort of got presented with this opportunity to apply to go and be a gap tutor overseas. I just thought it sounded like a relatively, good idea and an easy way to sort of cop out of the fact that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So yeah, I signed up and went through the process with that, and was lucky enough to get a position overseas, and just happy that I got it.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits now. Oh, here she is. Hello. Welcome, Liz. We've got you on. I'm so excited about that. We're so thrilled to have you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so I did your introduction for you, so you all know how marvelous you are. We're just talking now about why people do and don't take a break.
Great.
And you have seen hundreds and hundreds of students coming through the University of Auckland, as well as obviously in your private practice. What as a parent looking at at their young adult at home, who would you recommend a gap year for, and then who would you say it's not for you?
Oh, look, there's the students that are really struggling to just try to find anything. They're feeling the pressure that they have to make a decision, and they just know. Well, I think the students that know to go to university just know that they've got a plan, they know what they want to do, and they're keen to carry on. I think there are some students that get to the end of year 12, end of year 13, and they're a bit burnt out. They're quite confused, and there's like this societal norm in New Zealand, I have to say. It's not a worldwide trend, but it's definitely New Zealand that you just go to uni and just pick any old degree. Like, let's go to Otago is one I hear a lot. And I know it's hard because for parents to kind of go, oh, I don't want to be too much of a helicopter and tell them what they have to do. But also, equally, it's important for, I think, parents to engage the student and say, listen, rather than just rushing in and choosing a degree and choosing any old thing, because I don't know, have you guys talked about the statistics with dropout rates and like 40?
Yes,
You already
we
have
have.
talked
Yeah,
about
we
that.
have.
Great.
Yeah, we have.
And that's the thing. I mean, you get to uni, and I don't know if you gappers have spoken about it. There's no one telling you to go to lectures, are there?
No.
No one telling you to go to tutorials. You kind of have to do it on your own.
Mm.
And students get really lost and confused like that. I see it all the time. Students coming to me going, I just don't belong here, or I feel they're just not ready. They're just not ready.
So as a parent, you'd be listening for a little bit of confusion, a bit of I'm going to Otago, I don't know why, and then sort of asking them to perhaps push pause and see whether in fact that's actually the right thing for their son or daughter.
Yeah. And have you
Cool.
talked about how you do that and why?
We're going to get to that.
We're going to get to that.
I won't
We're
jump
getting
ahead
to
then.
that.
Okay.
So yes, but I would love to talk about the benefits of actually gapping it. And if you do a quick Google search, you will see lots of information about taking a gap year, lots of anecdotal information. And one study that we read said that 80% of all people that take a structured gap year get tremendous value from it. And it seems that the value is in two categories. One, personal growth, and then the other one kind of we'd categorize as performance. And the personal growth comes from, well, George is heading off to overseas, away from home, doing his own thing, having some independence, Meg doing exactly the same thing, going off to the South Island. So, the personal growth often comes from increased interpersonal skills, greater resourcefulness, adaptability, and probably most importantly, self-confidence. And then on the performance side of things, what we know is that when you come to study a little bit later, having got a bit of clarity, you do tend to perform better at university. So much lower dropout rates than counterparts, and actually often higher marks. But I would love to hear from you on this in a minute, Liz. And then at the end of all of that, at the end of the study, you're more employable because you actually have a broader experience base that's very attractive to employers. So George, can we start with you? Can you share with us what you would summarize as the personal and kind of ongoing benefits that you got from taking that time off?
Yeah, so I was put into quite a good situation where the school that I worked at overseas, there were 4 other gappies sort of similar ages to me. So right off the bat, early January 2014, I was meeting, 4 strangers that I was going to live with for the next year. So, right away you're out of your comfort zone and you've got to, make these friendships with these people. And then also, we're straight into work right away. The school had come back from Christmas holidays and we're into it, and you're sort of working alongside teachers that, it's their job and they're professionals, and you're sort of there looking a little bit lost, not knowing what to do. So there's a lot of adaptability, sort of, getting thrown in the deep end and trying to figure out how to do it. But, it's like anything, you do it for long enough, it gets easy enough. And then I guess outside of the work aspect to it, also just having the ability to travel quite a lot at such a young age, it's also the same sort of thing. You've sort of got to figure out how to do a lot of things by yourself. And then, once you've done it a couple of times, it's pretty straightforward. And, the things that seem relatively daunting early on in the year, by the end of the year, you're just like, what was I sort of worried about?
Yeah, fantastic. And then when you went, so then you came back and studied law. How did you find coming back to study? So obviously you didn't get put off completely coming back, which is a good thing. And so you came back to study. How did you find it impacted on, your time at university?
Yeah, so as Liz mentioned, uni's a bit different. No one's really sort of forcing you to do anything. That sort of, you got to take a bit of onus. And I definitely might have felt a bit of a hangover from the gap year, I guess, where sort of, I'd happily trot along to lectures and shoots and that, but I definitely wasn't putting my best foot forward early on. I was kind of like, what's the point? Really can't really be bothered. But then, after a while, you sort of you realize that you need to sort of get your ducks in a row and actually put in the work if you want to get the results. So I mean, it was a bit difficult initially getting back, but at the same time, I guess maybe once you're in that environment and you've sort of you've had your time off, you can kind of understand that now you do need to put in the work. And I think that's what maybe the reality check for me is kind of, I've had this year off to do it, and now I need to get back to, I guess, reality and put in a bit of work.
Cool, thank you for that. And Anna, what kind of benefits personally did you get from taking the break?
I learned a lot about myself and what I wanted to study. Like I said before, I was nannying quite a bit, and the children I were working with were they had a lot of learning difficulties or developmental difficulties. They were struggling a lot with dealing with big emotions and lots of different age ranges. And before, I thought I wanted to work with kids in a medical field, and I learned I really wanted to work with them on a more emotional and mental field, which is why, thanks to Liz and all of her career coach help, I decided to take on psychology. I think that it also helped me decide, having spent so much good time with my family, which I hadn't gotten to spend as much as I'd wanted to. I really wanted to be able to build a career that allowed me to spend lots of time with the family and with my family. So I think that was really good and really beneficial for me. It also,
fabulous.
it chilled me out a little bit. So I got to rest, and I was a little burnt out, and I recharged and jumped back into uni, and with a motivation that I hadn't had my first year of university. So I really, I credit that to the gap for sure.
Oh, thank you. You just prompted my second question, so thank you. And Liz, what do you see at Auckland University having, in terms of the difference? Students coming either a little later to study in their first year, or in fact having a break and coming back. What difference do you see it makes to their performance?
Oh, huge. I see the students that come straight from high school that aren't ready, and they literally are drifting and lost and confused and very stressed a lot of the time. Whereas the students that have had gaps are just that much older. They know themselves, they've had a bit of life experience, and I find that they hit it out of the park a lot of the time with their grades. They have more, and this is the big thing that we are noticing as a trend in the careers world, is the one word, and that is employability. And this is the big thing I say to students. It's not just about you walking around with blinkers on getting A grades. Employers are not actually interested in those sorts of students anymore. They want to know, who are you and how employable are you? It's not just what you've done at uni, it's all the stuff you've done alongside uni and outside uni that's going to get you where you want to go. And so those students that have had a break, look, I have to share this gorgeous story about a boy who he started uni and then he dropped out within, 4 months. Couldn't cope with it. Found the lectures just enormous. It was overwhelming for him. He'd kind of just grabbed onto something. So he went and got himself a job at Bunnings. And I don't know if you've talked about brain development, like with all the Nathan Wallace stuff you have already.
We have.
And he came to me, it was like the frontal cortex had finally kind of come online. He was in his mid-20s at that point. So he'd had not just a gap year, he'd about 3 or 4 years. And it was like, he'd come out of the fog and he was like, I'm ready now. I want to go back to university and this is what I want to do. And I said to him, how were you speaking to customers when you first started at Bunnings? He said, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I said, well, how are you now? Oh, I'm fine. I'm completely fine. I've learned all the different areas of Bunnings. It has been an amazing training ground for me, but I'm ready now to go and take my career to the next step. Which it just kind of sums it up, I think.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. Thank you so much, Liz. I'm going to move us on to the 2 M's, momentum and money. When we were doing our survey of parents in the lead up to this session, we talked to them of what are some of their big concerns around their kid taking a gap year. And lots of parents have said that they're worried about the fact that their son or daughter might lose momentum. Which is a concern. And the even worse, the terrible situation could be that they would start working and see all of that money and fall in love with the money and then never want to go back and study again. So even though the US data that we have completely disproves that. I'd love to talk about that. So those wonderful Americans have got an association, the American Association of the Gap. Actually, it's not, it's the American Gap Association. But they did a piece of research that said 90% of people who take a structured gap period go back to study and then have, as we've already discussed, much lower dropout rates. So I would actually love to talk to you first, Meg, on if you were going to coach a parent worried about the fact that their son or daughter might lose momentum or get stuck in earning money and never want to study, what would you say to them?
Taking a gap year, if anything, convinces you to strive to be better. Like my motivation for uni, like at the end of high school, was like to continue on studying. There was no motivation at all. But it wasn't until I started working full time and earning money, I realized that it wasn't very much money that I was earning, first of all. So there wasn't much to fall in love with. And my brain was sort of dead, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, totally does.
There was just no joy in working in hospo for me. And so it propelled me forward. And so when I did find my degree, it meant that I loved going every single day, and I turned up to every single lecture, and I just fell in love, and it was it was a dream come true, really, to go to university, which I never thought I'd say before I went to the gap year.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so fabulous. And Anna, how about you? You didn't lose momentum. So what do you think? What would you say to parents worried about that?
Well, I can tell you my dad was a little bit worried for sure. When I decided to take a gap year, he was like, okay, so this is it, right? We're done with university. Like, you want to join me in the company? But honestly, his support in the long run of letting me, make my own decisions, encouraging me to move out of the country and go to a university, that was never in my plan, my big, type A 5-year plan. That's really what kept me going. I also think that having a plan before I took the gap was really big in holding my momentum, knowing that I was going to go to university, knowing that I was going to end up in a school, and having a time frame really helped keep me on track so that I wasn't kind of floating and lost and not sure what I was going to do. I think that made the world of difference for me personally.
Fantastic. And George, you were traveling the world and earning a whole heap of, well, probably slightly more money than in hospo, I'm assuming, although I could be assuming completely incorrectly. So what made you decide not to stay with the money and come back and study?
Yeah, so funnily enough, we weren't on a whole lot of money. In the position we were in, the school I worked at, they provided us with like a flat, and we ate with the boarding house, so we didn't have any costs really, but we got sort of a small wage on the side, which was enough to get through, along with obviously some savings from back home. So I mean, I could have happily stayed and done that for a while, but at the same time, it just probably wasn't the end result for me, and I don't know if it would have led to sort of many big bucks down the track.
Fantastic. And Liz, for you, what do you see around this kind of, do you see with your private practice this issue of parents being concerned about these sorts of things? Yeah. And what do you share with them?
Look, I think there's lots of issues there, but one of the big things I see is students who might get to the end of a degree and just have absolutely no idea what they want to do post university, and that's one of the reasons, because they've never ever had to make a decision for themselves. And that's why I think some of the parents are going, look, I love like Anna's story of her father going, look, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust that you can work this out. And I do try and really encourage parents to let their child make their own decisions about that, because it's really important that young people know their parents trust them to make those good decisions, so then they can go back and talk to them about things. Because I think when they are not doing well at university and they drop out, it sometimes can be really devastating for that young person. They feel like they've really failed. So I think that the most important thing is keeping that relationship alive with that young person.
That's beautiful advice.
Yeah.
And now I think we're going to put the shoe on the other foot and have, rather than the parent being worried about momentum, we're going to think about the teenager being worried about momentum, aren't we, Sharon?
Yeah. So FOMO. I'd like to talk about FOMO. So, even if parents out there think that gap year is a great idea, I was one of those. Many teens are pretty scared about the fact that, their mates are going to Vic and going to Otago and I'm going to be left behind. I know my two were. And, I really struggled to be able to articulate why it is a good idea and how to get over that FOMO situation. So I'd be interested in, George, your thoughts about what parents could do to help, I suppose, open the door to this kind of conversation for when a parent might see that a gap year might be a good idea, but their child is struggling with that FOMO concept.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a tricky one. I know that for me personally, I wasn't really that worried about it, but I'd probably think that I was in the minority there, because obviously, it's a pretty big call to, leave all your mates behind and sort of go do your own thing. But I guess, it's the one thing where it's like, you can't sort of keep going down the same street for your whole life. And, if you went to uni, there's no way that your friends are all going to the same uni. So you're going to meet new people and make new friends there. And obviously, the friends that you have at school, they're going to remain your friends, but you're going to make new friends anywhere you go. So, going away for a period of time and meeting some new people isn't going to be the end of the world. In fact, it's probably a better thing to do in terms of, I guess, maybe broadening your horizons and not being stuck in the same boat forever, because, it's bit dim if you were just sort of hanging out with the same people all your life, I guess, maybe.
And not feeling happy with it. And having that horrible feeling of not being connected into it because you're just doing something because you've grabbed it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably a two-way street in the sense that, if you take a gap year, you're going to be doing all these different things, and some of your friends that didn't might actually see that and be like, oh, I'm missing out on a bit of that. So, it's not just you that's going to be feeling that way, I guess.
That's true. And Meg, what about you? When you decided to take yours space away, did you have any of those FOMO feelings?
Not really.
No, you didn't. Very unusual panel we've got.
Yeah, I know. It's because I guess in high school there are cliques, and I was just so keen to get out of that, and similar to what George was saying, like experience, I don't know, new people, and imagine only being friends with the same people that you went to high school with. Nothing wrong with that. But I just wanted to experience more, and I wasn't worried about missing out of my other friends, because if they were real friends, they would still stay in touch with me. And I'm still great friends with all of my friends in high school, so it wasn't any problem. Like, we all go to different universities and we're all still mates,
that's
it's
so
not
true.
a big deal.
Yeah. I wonder, Liz, if starting to talk about gap years really early on is a good idea, because I do wonder whether by the time you've hit year 12 and 13, you're starting to get into a track with a tailwind that's hard to kind of stop. And so I wonder whether opening the conversation way sooner.
I agree, because there's that current. It's like a fixation, and it's all anybody talks about. That's right. Having the conversation earlier. I think anything to do with careers should be done earlier. That's my opinion on it all. But absolutely great idea.
And sort of, I think maybe connected to the FOMO thing, I wonder whether my children were thinking, how do you make it happen? How do you plan it? You know, there are so many choices when you think about taking time off. I mean, you could be, you know, studying, you could be volunteering, you could be working, you could be traveling, you could be doing a combination of all of those things. And you could be doing what George did, which is a much more structured thing, Camp America or tutoring like you did, or you could be doing it a bit more organically like you did, Anna. And then Meg, you did a little bit of both, didn't you? Because you did working and then you went to Whitecliff and did a certificate course in that time. So, you know, we've got the whole range here. So how do you help a team plan for a gap year to get what you need out of it?
So I mean, I do lots of career planning with young people, and when I help them to sort of discover some options of what they might like to do, giving them a go, then we can structure a gap year around, okay, what do you want to experience? What are some things that you want to check out? I call it reality testing. So, and what would be some skill sets that might be useful to develop as well. So I often say to students at the university, I said, you'd never buy a $30,000 car without test driving it. But a lot of people forget to test drive the job before they spend $30,000 on their education. So let's get strategic here. Let's see what things you could be trying out in your gap year. Like, let's say you wanted to be a pharmacist, well, you could go and work in as a retail assistant in a pharmacy and just have a try out of it. You don't need a degree to do that. Yes, it could be a bit of travel and looking around, and maybe languages might be something, or the key part is having a bit of a plan and not doing nothing. Because if you do nothing, not only are you staying still, you're actually going backwards. And also parents do not like that at all. Like, it is one thing, and that sometimes I do get clients who come with their arms twisted around their back from their parents going, go and see Liz, and can you please get him off the couch? So I think that's the key part, is parents do, you know, there needs to, I work for Miomo, I did a bit of work with Making It on my own, and we have a living optimally contract, and maybe setting some expectations with your young person that this is not a year for you just to muck around. You do need to do something. And then, you have a contract with it.
And I like your idea, Anna, that you were saying, is because you always had that kind of you had a goal you were going to do, you know, you had a goal to go. And so you were wanting to use that year for a certain number of things, staying with your family, learning to surf, you know, and actually just chilling out a bit because you had actually been, you know, so full on for such a long time. And that was okay because that was your mission, wasn't it? And as a side product, you ended up finding something that you really wanted to do, which was quite amazing. Yeah.
It's funny, I wanted to be a doctor my first year of university, and I spoke to the head of the ER in my town. I was really excited. I was like, what's your biggest piece of advice for me? I want to be a doctor just like you. He's like the top doctor at our hospital. And he said, you just did 12 years of school and you're about to do another 12. Take a gap year. That was his first and biggest piece of advice to me. And at the time I didn't listen, and I regret it. And I went back and did it, and it helped a lot.
Yeah, totally. And Meg, I was really interested in your story too, because you arrived at doing a certificate at Whitecliff that exposed you to lots and lots of different forms of fine arts and creative endeavours, you know, which was part and parcel of your gap year that gave you a real exposure to lots and lots of different things. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was amazing. So most universities have certificate programs where you sort of trial run the degree, basically. And at Whitecliff, they have a fine art and design certificate there. And it meant that I could do, because I wasn't sure if I knew that I wanted to work in the creative industries, but I didn't know what sector, and there are huge sectors. So every few weeks we would choose different sort of sectors, and it was amazing. It meant that I got a taste of every single tiny aspect of that industry.
And how did that help you then decide to go with what you're doing now, the ceramics work?
So it propelled me forward, because I looked at the degree at Whitecliff, and I saw that they didn't have the workshop space that I really wanted, because I really wanted to go into furniture design. And so then I moved to Unitech and started doing ceramics and furniture design first, and then moving into homeware and dinnerware. Yeah.
Nice. So that gave you that kind of breadth of understanding of your options, didn't it? And then
Totally.
it allowed you to then focus in on what you wanted.
It meant that I could cross a lot of things off my list, basically, because that's kind of the most important thing, isn't it? Is narrowing down your
nice
interests.
And George, when you were thinking about what you were wanting to achieve in your year, what were you thinking about?
Yeah, well, I guess initially I wasn't really, thinking about too much, what I wanted to do. Now I was just pretty happy to be out there and doing something a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of, I guess, always the plan for me personally, that I wanted to go to university and get a degree. And I don't know if doing the gap year helped me narrow down what I wanted to study. And I guess that I was lucky enough to do law and settle the way through, I guess. But yeah, I guess it's just one of those things that it's sort of the experience behind me going through the degree probably played a part in it, especially later down the track, and talking to prospective employers. It's a great talking point. So yeah.
And so when you came out and you were, did people notice your gap year time and ask you, like, how was that when you were actually applying for work down the track?
Yeah, so I'd say that was sort of the most discussed thing at any of the interviews I had. I just chucked it on my CV that I'd done it, and I spent more time talking about that than how I enjoyed uni and whatnot. And so it's a pretty easy talking point, and it's one of those things where if you get started on it, you can happily chew people's ears off, going through what you did and where you went and all that. So yeah, it was very, very beneficial when it sort of came to getting a job.
Yeah, nice. And what would you say that you're nodding there, Liz? Because it's back to that employability story, isn't it?
It's so important now. And look, I also just want to say that there are other types of careers that, like, for apprenticeships as well. It's not just all about uni as well. You can have a gap year before you go into an apprenticeship.
Absolutely.
And once again, reality testing, go and test drive it, go and check it out. There's also, even some young people that go into places that have sort of the management structure, like Bunnings, for example, and you get promoted up to management level. There's all of those to explore too, which I think is really worth mentioning. It's not just about going to uni.
No, that's very true. That's very true. And so I thought we could just wrap it up and just, because I know a number of the parents were when we asked the question, what questions have you got about gap year? There's some, and one in the chat about if you've got UE in year 12 and you take a gap year in year 13, you can still come back to university whenever you like. And that was
if you've got university entrance, you can. Yeah.
And the same goes for most universities. This was a big question on a number of the parents' lips was, if you've already got a scholarship of some kind, most universities would be very happy to defer that scholarship for a year if you decide to take some time off. So, and most certainly your first year is still funded because it's funded whenever you get there. I think you could still be 95 years old and still get your first year university funded. So, that's not an issue. So, so I think, those sorts of logistical concerns aren't, shouldn't be a barrier to a gap year. But certainly COVID, is. And out there, if you do a Google search on structured gap years, there are loads and loads of providers out there that do amazing work in putting together programs like George experienced. A lot of people can think of Camp America, but there's a myriad of options that they offer employment opportunities, study opportunities, travel opportunities, a combination of all of them. Obviously, you're going to have to stump up with some cash, but there are loads and loads of them out there, and they're desperate for obviously getting things up and running. But with COVID, of course, there would be considerations around insurances and, you know, variants and other things to consider for sure. But, you know, traveling locally is still definitely, I'm sure, in the question. But yeah, so the structured versus unstructured, have you got any kind of thoughts around that, Liz? I mean, I think we've had the variety in our gappers today, but what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, look, I think there needs to be, I think, between parent and young person, an agreement, a bit of an agreement going, okay, you're going to have some time. At the end of it, it would be great if you could get into some sort of study, whatever that's going to look like, an apprenticeship or a university or whatever it's going to look like. And in that time, I do think it's a good idea to work, and because employers actually look for that on CVs now. They go, have you worked before? Have you got someone that can reference you and say, yep, that person turns up on time and does a good job and can problem solve? So I think that's important. But if they are just doing travel alone, you know, I mean, it is a bit different right now with COVID and whether people are at the comfort levels around that. But I do think a bit of a plan and a bit of structure would really help, help.
Yeah, nice.
With young people. And I just saw the question there. It said, you know, can you defer enrolment? Yes, you can. I know I just spoke to the university today about it. Definitely with 6 months, there's absolutely no issues. But anything after that, you just need to send an email to the faculty.
Yeah.
But it's normally completely fine.
Yeah. And I did a Google search as well around the other universities in New Zealand, and most of them are more than happy for a year deferment. So if you've got your scholarship and you've got your $5,000 or whatever it is, you can push that out for a year and pick it up next year. Yeah,
that's the same with enrolment. And I know Anna, I spoke to you about this. You said a lot of students in the US will enroll at a uni, then take a gap year, and you know, have another think about their course, and that gives them time to really study the different papers within the course and have a think about it and look around. But and
it doesn't have to be a year, does it? Sorry,
no,
Anna. Yeah, you know, because universities operate, you know, 12
July
months in the year, and you could do
summer school
until, totally. So there's lots of different options. It's not just everything starts in February, and if you miss the February boat, you've missed the boat. It's not like that anymore nowadays, is it?
No.
Yeah. Right.
And so I actually sent an email out to the students I'd seen at the university going, has anyone of you had a gap year? I was inundated with people coming back saying, yeah, I've done one. Lots of students I did notice did one during their studies.
Yeah.
And quite a few did one between their undergrad and postgrad as well. Yeah.
So yes, that's a very good point. Having that gap doesn't have to be between first and second, well, between before the start of the first year. It could be any time. Yeah, that's a great thing to bear in mind.
And I just something that did come up is students thinking they were going to hate going back to uni when they were older than all the other students. And I know you're nodding, Anna, but at first it was like, oh God, that's going to be a real issue. And then after a couple of weeks, it was like, it's just such a non-issue. It really is.
Yeah. Meg, have you got anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm actually the youngest in my degree.
Right.
All of the others are, 25, 26. There's 31-year-old, and we all get on great because we're all interested in the exact same things. So it's not an issue.
Yeah. And I wonder whether, even after that first year at university, because my two were all about, I want to be with my friends. But then as soon as they got there and they did their first year, they realized, well, Annabella's doing a 5-year degree, and someone else is doing a 3-year degree, and someone else is doing a double major, and that's going to be 4 years, and everyone's going to be finishing at different times anyway. And so once they've done that first year, they've got that realization, and so maybe that FOMO starts to slip away a little bit, and that those options do open up. And I guess the last thing I would sort of say is that, in New Zealand at the moment, we're at like almost zero unemployment. There are jobs everywhere. For people that, if they did want to do a bit of a combination of travel and work, and stay here in New Zealand, that's a really valid option to actually get some work experience out there, isn't there? Particularly at the moment where there are so many jobs going.
There sure are. It is a candidate market at the moment.
Yeah. So we're kind of now towards the end, unless anyone else has got any kind of points that they would feel like they need to add before we start. I just wondered if anyone's got any questions that we can pop them in the, okay,
we still
we'll
have
answer the
time if you have any last
We've got
questions.
some questions, but what I would say to our people attending tonight is that we will make a blog of this, and we will put some of the links to some of the websites that we like and some of the research, the links to the research in the blog, so you can check that out as well. Because, you know, it's one thing to hear it from us, but it's sometimes people like to read it for themselves. So any other questions before we wrap and say goodbye to, thank you to all of our friends?
Well, I just want to make sure we answered Jo Nichols' question. She said, you mentioned a structured gap year. What elements should be considered to ensure good structure? And we talked about, we've talked about having a goal for a start. That was an incredibly important element. We've talked about having potentially a contract with your team, which sounds like a really cool thing to do. And we talked about testing, actually going out there and exploring. Are there, just before we finish up, are there any other elements you think that should be in place for a good structure?
I actually just think get a job. I really do. I can't emphasize that enough, actually, as paying their own way and learning what it's like to actually work, and because there's just so much value in getting a job and what they learn from it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We have got a couple of last minute questions. Firstly, from Catherine saying, can you share, so George, can you share some more information about what you did? The son watching the webinar is really keen to find out a bit more about it.
Yeah, so the school I went to in Christchurch here, we they had, I guess, an association with a company called Tutors Worldwide, and from what I understand, Tutors Worldwide go through South Africa, Australia and New Zealand, and basically interview candidates for GET tutor positions at schools in the UK. So yeah, I just applied to them. I had an interview with someone who came around and did it all, and yeah, got offered a position at a school, and then yeah, once I accepted that, it was sort of early January, I flew over there and met the other people I'd be working with, and then yeah, just worked as a GET tutor around the school. So it was a few various tasks, you know, helping out with sort of office administration, helping out teaching and coaching sport, and then helping out in the boarding house because the school had one there. And yeah, they have a lot of school holidays over there, so you get a fair bit of time off, and just in that time, getting out and shooting around, doing a bit of traveling.
Yeah, great.
Cool.
Great.
Oh, thank you for that. That's really helpful. Thanks so much. Somebody has asked what, you know, obviously there are standard websites like Seek and Trade Me, etc., but what websites in particular would you recommend for a student finding a job? Do you have a view on that, Liz?
Student job search is amazing.
Mm.
I mean, I use it to get to do lots of things around home, and the key part is make sure they've got a good CV, and I can absolutely put my daughter's CV. I'll obviously change her name up on my website if anyone wants to download it. But that's really important. They get a good CV, and to be honest, it's just. Remember, only 7 to 30% of jobs get advertised. The rest of the jobs are found in that hidden job market. So it's completely parent networks. And for most young people, I say print off your CV 20 times and get on that footpath and go door knocking. And if the manager's not there at Peter Pitt, find out when the manager will be there. Go back when it's not busy and say, I would like a job, please. And because people don't do it, and you are actually showing them just by doing that the types of qualities that they're actually looking for in an employee, and that is way more effective than just relying on job sites.
100%, and I can tell you, my children, that's the only way they've ever got jobs.
Yep. Totally believe it. That or their contacts, the parent contacts are just huge, or their mates might have a job at Pack and Save and got them a job, or whatever it is.
Awesome.
I'd love to talk. I mean, I think that one of the parents has raised a question about teens having a mental health, you know, mental health having a hammering due to COVID and being pretty, you know, disenchanted, had it, exhausted.
Yep.
I do wonder whether actually a gap year isn't a good thing for people in that space, because you need to be fresh to get into a tertiary study situation.
Well, and also now, I mean, I just listened to the national program today, and like for me personally at the university, we're not on campus at all, and we're not for the rest of the year. And now with this new variant coming in, I don't know how that's going to look for us educationally. Are we going to stay on Zoom for a few more months? I don't know. And there are some students that just can't do it anymore. They are languishing is the new word that we're using, and I'm talking to a lot of the lecturers lately. They have never had to do so much pastoral care that they're doing now with the students. It is tough, and I think I remember seeing a student. He came in to get a CV checked, and I said, listen, you've got to get out there, and anywhere that you've had to rub shoulders, interact and communicate with real live human beings instead of through a screen is only going to benefit you and your employability and your ability to get a job. And he said, I know, but I can't. I've been in lockdown. He was very insular, and he knew he needed to do it. And I said, look, get a customer service job if you can. Come on, let's start there, because it's absolute gold on a CV is that customer service.
And to build on what you've said, Liz, Anna, that's been your experience, hasn't it? In terms of you talking about feeling incredibly burnt out, and languishing a bit yourself, and then having that time to pause and be with your family has been hugely helpful, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that doing university or doing school, even over Zoom and during COVID, was a very mentally taxing thing. I did a whole half a semester at my last university online, and having that time to actually collect my thoughts and spend time with my family and kind of bunker down for a little bit, it really helped with the mental health crisis that is happening now due to COVID.
Yeah, totally.
We've probably got time for 2 more questions, and there's one for you, Sharon Spencer. I think you can answer this one. Student exchange is not get a job, but a student exchange a good option?
I think there are so many benefits that can come out of a gap year. Student exchanges, you get exposed to, different cultures. In my case, Indonesia was a bit of a strange thing for a girl from Te Puke to do when she was 17. Language, you're dealing with cultural changes, you're dealing with people that you'd never otherwise met. You're dealing with, in Indonesia's case, poverty and extreme rich and the tropics and all kinds of different things. And so, through that experience, where it doesn't have to be as extreme as Indonesia, but you're learning to adapt, you're learning to be resourceful, you're learning to make decisions, make judgments, and figure out how to be in certain places, and all of those things build your confidence. So I kind of feel like might not be a job, but there's just so much richness that you don't always know in the moment that you're gaining it, I would say. But when you look back, you realize, oh my God, that was amazing. That really was amazing.
Cool. And one last quick question. Sun wants to know if there is a grace period at uni where you can start for a month and then pull out without losing your first year free scholarships.
I'm not quite 100% sure on that, but I do. That's something you can just email the university about. But I do know that university is always the end of March. We get really busy because there is a cutoff point where students are allowed to change their subjects or their papers for free. They don't have to pay extra. But I'm not sure on the scholarship or the first year free. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be that mean.
I do know at Victoria University you get 2 weeks.
Right.
So you can go to your lectures, understand it, you can chop and change, and you can withdraw and get your money back if you do it before 2 weeks is up.
Yeah.
But I think every university will probably have something a little bit different, so it will be worthwhile checking. Great. Well, we got there in the end. Yay, Liz made it. That's awesome. Thank you for bearing with us, ladies and gentlemen. But I'll hand it over to you to say, wrap it up for tonight, Susie.
Yeah, look, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much to George and Meg and Anna. You guys were amazing. We wish you all the very best in your careers going forward. And thank you so much, Liz, for this. It's been fantastic. We're very, very glad we got you in the end. And thanks to everybody for hanging on in there. There is a little short survey at the end of this. If you can stay for one more minute and complete that, that would be really helpful. It's going to talk about any future topics that you'd like to hear about. So thanks everybody, and have a wonderful, for us in Auckland, last week of level 3.2.2 or whatever it is that we're in at the moment. To see you.
Bye-bye. Thanks everybody. Thanks Meg, George and Anna and Liz. Bye.
Thanks. Thank you so much, you too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.